Asked someone to be here that I feel would be appropriate to kick off what we're doing with the education of New England Lodge. Back in, gosh, it was 2015 or 2014, I was asked by the Grand Lodge of Ohio to develop a program that could be presented statewide, which came about to be known as Mason's Lead Better. Prior to me rolling that workshop out live, I decided to do a test of the material, and it was suggested a number of people to be in the room to evaluate that. And one of those men that was in the room is the one standing to my right. And I still remember your words, Dan, as you told me, I'm not going to be paying much attention and looking at you. I'm going to be writing. And you gave me what you called a stream of consciousness as he critiqued the whole program for me. It proved very valuable to me. And so I just found that his advice was sound. He led me in some directions that I didn't think about. He helped me modify and give me suggestions on the material, so I want to thank you again for that. But he's here really tonight for a number of reasons besides that. Dan's the author of this book, The Craft-Driven Lodge, and he'll talk a little bit about that this evening. He is a past master, as it was advertised, from Clark Lodge 101. He's the Charter Master of Arts and Sciences Lodge here in the 14th District. So he's got a lot of knowledge about lodge education, and I think you'll enjoy and find this engaging. He's not going to just talk to you, he's probably going to be asking you some questions. So, Dan, if you will, with that.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
You want to clip that on? And
I will do that.
I'll go back and see if you're in front.
Okay.
And if you're not, you're going to have to lose some weight.
I've been told that already anyway, so.
You're good.
Okay. Brothers, I've been a Mason 43 years, and for about the first 20 of it, I kept scratching my head. I said, I wonder why this has survived for so many centuries when all I'm getting in lodge meeting is superficial pablum. You know, bills, arguments, structure, superficial work of the ritual, and I said, there's got to be more to it. So I asked people questions, and what I got was, I don't know, we've just always done it that way. So thanks to an introduction to the Philalethes Society, which is a beautiful international research organization, I stumbled into a guy out of Canada named Nelson King, who hooked me up with some amazing books, authors, and great scholars. And as a result, I became what I call a self-taught Mason. And as I learned about Freemasonry, I began to realize that, you know, being a self-taught Mason is not what this craft is about. You know, we're supposed to be coming to meetings for another reason. So let's start with some questions. Why do we gather as Masons? We're here tonight. Why? Your thoughts. Brother Thurloff, you're new. Why did you come tonight?
Education.
Oh. Okay, well, with the rest of you, why do you come to Lodge? Some of you have been doing it for a lot of years.
It's a habit, man.
It's a habit. Yeah. So is crack cocaine and heroin. They're habits too. That doesn't make it smart.
Fellowship.
Fellowship? Okay, yeah. Freemasonry is about relationships. You know, that's what we talk a lot about. Okay? But we also come because of our ritual. That's what people tell me they really like. We really like to do ritual. So what is the purpose of our ritual? Why do we do that? Brother Strong, I know you've got quite an honored career in this fraternity. Why do we do ritual?
to convey the principles and meaning of Freemasonry in a structured way so that hopefully all brethren who join the craft will get essentially the same instruction initially.
So you're saying that the ritual has a purpose, which is to instruct, to share ideas, to teach. Okay. The rest of you agree with that?
Yes.
Why do you agree with that?
Well, because I guess for my part, I found that to be the case to a limited degree, is that the ritual incorporates a story.
Okay.
Storyline, and through that storyline, there are lessons that are embedded in that story, and those lessons, if we assimilate them and understand them properly, improve us as human beings, as men, as Masons.
Wow, that's a pretty complicated process you just laid out there. Okay. So, let's back up with the thing. So what really makes a man a Mason? Come on.
It's an obligation.
Our obligation. I knew somebody would have to come up with that. It's right out of the catechism. What makes you a Mason? Answer, my obligation. So what happens during that 2 minutes at the altar that makes you from a man to a Mason?
Binds us all to commonality of the same thought process.
Oh, wow. And you figured all that out in 2 minutes.
No, I've done that for a while now.
Okay. So from when you knelt there, not physically there, but symbolically there, and you took that obligation, boom, you had that all figured out, right?
That's something you learn after being around for 28 years.
28 years, okay. So it doesn't just happen like, I don't remember any bolt of lightning or any flashing or any great wave of warmth coming over my body when I finish the obligation. So the obligation is an action that we do that states that purpose, but we're not really any different before and after. We've just made promises. So then what else needs to happen besides the obligation to actually transform a man into a Mason?
Instruction.
Instruction. How much instruction?
A lifetime.
Oh, well, we got a short form catechism. Is that good? We got a long form catechism. Is that good?
It's all good. It just takes a while.
Ah, okay.
The catechism.
What?
There's more than just the catechism.
Okay, such as?
What you learn from your brethren.
Okay. So what do you learn when you ask somebody about why do we lead candidates by taking their right arm, but we escort distinguished visitors by offering our right arm? And you ask a question like that, and what kind of answer do you get?
Different ones usually.
Different ones. Are any of them right?
Hopefully.
Okay. There's a reason for that. It's in medieval traditions and all that. But the bottom line is, without that in-depth instruction, we're not transforming anybody. You know, we run them through a set of motions, we hand them a dues card, but we haven't really done our job. Okay? So let's go back to why do we gather as Masons? It's a habit, it's a tradition, and all that. So let's look at what we're supposed to do when we get here. There's one particular line of ritual that we heard tonight that tells us what we're supposed to do when we get here. What do you think that line is? When? What?
Subdue our passions.
Subdue our passions. Okay. What are we supposed to do before we subdue our passions?
Learn, yeah.
What came you here to do? We come to learn. Now, I'm of the opinion that there's a comma missing there. Okay? We come to learn.
Talk about that.
It's actually 3 pieces.
Exactly. There's nothing in Freemasonry that's 2 amount to anything except 2 columns and that kind of stuff. But if you put that comma there that's not in the ritual, it says we come to learn, comma, subdue our passions, comma, and improve ourselves in Masonry. That makes sense. Okay? I've surveyed other jurisdictions. It's about half and half of whether or not that comma there. I'm going to chalk it up to a typo. So whenever I use that line, I say it as 3 distinct parts. but we come to learn. So that tells me that if we leave a meeting and we've not learned anything, our lodge has failed us. Wow. Well, I'm of the belief that lodges have been failing for about 125 years. And the fact that I've learned what I've learned on my own is a perfect example as to why. So I've made it my passion to make sure that nobody has to be a self-taught Mason ever again. So now, if we need an education, a thorough, detailed education to actually make a man into a Mason, what should that look like? Now, I know what I went through back in 1977, and I went through an entered apprentice degree. I had this lecture, none of which stuck, because I'm sitting in a chair looking at 80 slides in a carousel, most of which have no content or are completely redundant. And this guy just rambled through this stuff in a monotone. I'm sure it was letter perfect, because they all said it was. And nothing stuck, and I walked out of there going, okay, now what? And they handed me a book of code, and they said, here, learn this, regurgitate it in 4 weeks, and you're good. Okay, I'm a 21-year-old college student. I can do that, and I did. I came back in a month, and they ran me through another ceremony, and they stuck another book in my hand, and I had that one figured out in 20 minutes. So I came back 2 weeks later, ran through another ceremony. They stuck a book in my hand, and I had that one down in 2 weeks. I'm done. And what have I learned?
Nothing.
Zippo. I got put as a senior steward. I learned that in 15 minutes. I worked my way all the way through Masters. So I was Master of Clark Lodge at 26 years old. Youngest guy in the history of the lodge to ever make it that far. And I was letter perfect with my work. But what did I know about Freemasonry? Nada. I'd ask questions. I don't know. That's what the words say. Why do we do this? I don't know. We've always done it that way. It was like learning a lecture by de Gaulle in French phonetically, delivering it perfectly, and having no idea what I was talking about. It wasn't until 15 years later that I started asking questions of the people who actually knew what they were talking about. And that's when I began to discover things like Albert Mackey. They're all over the lodge, but nobody knew how to use them. Okay? Books by some really cool guys like Carl Claudy. Okay? If you want to get really technical, you get into Albert Pike and Morals and Dogma, which is really thick and obtuse. But my favorites were Preston, Webb, and Jeremy Cross. Okay? They wrote between 1750 and 1820. They were the originators of Masonry as we know it today in terms of the formality of things. They're the ones that pulled it all together. And I learned so much from reading them. So what I wanted to do was say, then how can a lodge do a better job of providing that thorough and in-depth education to its brothers, rather than just learning the proficiencies, which is all we ever did. In fact, now there's a short form proficiency. You just do a third of it, okay? But there's something new on the horizon that I really like, and we'll talk about that later. So, what are some things we should be doing with our new brothers to really help transform them into Masons? What do you got? Yeah.
Well, I'll attempt to answer that because I happen to be trying to do that with two recent apprentices. And I guess I'll answer that we have recently, I suppose, created this Master Craftsman class for Masons who want to be able to help and train and educate. And then that class then lets us utilize, when we're talking with these new Masons, it lets us utilize aspects of the ritual, aspects of the lecture, kind of explaining that bit piece by piece, dissecting it, taking it apart. There's questions in there that you can ask, what do you think this means, what does this mean to you, etc. So we're basically not just simply saying memorize this booklet, but we're taking the booklet, so to speak, apart, piece by piece, talking about each symbol, talking about each gesture, talking about each lesson that's to be learned.
Okay, so the Master Craftsman materials are a big help and a big leap forward. Yeah, your brother.
If I may sum it up, my master craftsman was Dick Snow.
Okay.
And he would spend,
He's legendary.
And yeah, and we would spend 30 to 45 minutes of work on the word. And probably a good hour or more on what he liked to call the esoteric. Why is this word this word? What does this mean? Why do we say it this way? And those things added just this depth and richness to what I learned that it really added to me that extra value and made it something that I think was much more sublime than just reading.
You were fortunate. I never benefited from that, okay? But you're right. That is an important part, is getting beneath just the superficial, these are the words, and looking at why are those words important. I've always looked at our ritual and saying that each word and phrase is the tip of a philosophical iceberg. There's a lot more attached to it than what we think of. And let me give you an example. Like I said, I've been a Mason 42 years. I've been reading a lot, lecturing a lot, written a lot, been involved with a lot of things, and yet I'm still learning. I'm still an apprentice learning. We were having a discussion over in Springfield at a local tavern with a group of Masons, and we were going through the part of the EA lecture where it talks about that, you know, the person was divested of all metallic substances for two purposes. First, that they might bring nothing offensive or defensive into the lodge. Oh, wait a minute, what does that mean? Well, the superficial meaning is no guns, knives, or weapons, so that nobody in the lodge gets hurt if you freak out. That makes sense. But what other meaning could there be associated with that idea? And one guy popped up, he's been a Mason now about 5 years, he goes, it's your attitude. And I went, what? He says, it's your attitude. We don't want you to come through that preparation door with an attitude that is offensive to the lodge because of your preconceived ideas, or to have your mind closed or being defensive about what is being offered to you during that ritual experience. I'm going like, dang, I never thought of that. I've heard this lecture how many hundreds of times, I've given it how many times, and I never figured that out. That is the kind of conversations that helps a man learn what's available in our ritual and in our craft. That's part of that transformation. And it's still happening to me every day, and I thank God it happens, because that's why I keep coming back to this stuff. So let's talk about education in Freemasonry kind of as it started out. Historically, Masonic education would be considered an oxymoron. Freemasonry was education, period, no questions asked. There was no such thing as a Masonic meeting and then an educational program. They were one and the same. Freemasonry for the first 200 years, before the Grand Lodge era, and the first 150 years after the Grand Lodge era, was simply a bunch of guys getting together in a room, usually in a tavern, until somebody had the bright idea, like your forefathers did, to build a dedicated lodge building. Okay? Get together in a tavern, have a dinner, do some ritual, and do some instruction. And the primary form of instruction wasn't the long formal lectures like we have now. It was questions and answers, okay? And what you do is you would give the tough questions to the experienced brothers so that those who were less experienced would hear and learn. And then you give easier questions to the new guys to put them on the spot to get them used to the idea of thinking about things and talking about things. So if I was going to ask about the purpose of a cable tow, I could ask our new entered apprentice over here, why did he think he had a rope around his neck? But I could ask somebody who's a lot more experienced something about, what does it mean to have a rough and a perfect ashlar? And how does that describe a journey in life? Which gets people going, what? That's not in the lecture. And you're right, it's not. But it's implied. It's that esoteric meaning that goes deeper. That's what Freemasonry was, okay? So when they had a meeting, they would do ritual, they would have a social time, they would teach each other, and they would learn, okay? They focused on teaching the skills of speculative Freemasonry, just like our ancient operative tradesmen would teach the skills of working in stone and the building craft, okay? You teach somebody what they need to know, you help them perfect it, and the conversations, the discussions were the main way of doing that. So when we learn things, though, if I tell you once, that's fine. You may have an idea. But the question I have is, if you watch a YouTube video on changing a carburetor, does that make you a master mechanic?
Makes you a horrible example.
Yeah. So you need to get out there with someone who knows what they're doing, shoulder to shoulder, spend some time. Develop your skills. Begin to work on understanding how that all might operate so that with practice you develop confidence and skill, and that takes time. So what we have forgotten how to do with our candidates is to spend time. Like you mentioned, Dick Snow spent 40 minutes on the little code in the book and another hour and a half on all that's related to that and the things that it left to when the conversation drifted off into other kinds of things. That's the cool kind of meetings that I've been enjoying for years, as all that. So, what happened before the Civil War when we used to do things well, thoroughly, and in depth? And the time that I came through in 1977 when I got a 30-minute rush job. What happened? Yeah.
The lodge is no longer a source of education to people. They have other sources of education. So that educational process has become less important. When the lodge was originally established, a lot of times it was the only way people could learn something in the wilderness that was America. So.
And I agree with you to a point. There's other places to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, geometry, mathematics, and basic calculation and all that. But where can you learn Freemasonry? Wait a minute, how much? What?
From older brethren, from experienced brethren.
Okay, that assumes that those older brethren know something that's worth teaching. Okay?
Dan, could part of it be, just something that came to mind, was during that period a rush of great numbers of men to join Freemasonry, and so we got involved in making an efficient process to get all these men through, and kind of forgot about the depth that should have been.
I think there's a lot of factors, and that is one of them. And a story that Steve Kokenauer told me that really struck home. And there was one year in the late 1950s where Westgate Lodge initiated, passed, and raised over 250 men in 1 year. And that was when the rule said one at a time, all 3 degrees. 250 men. That means you're doing at least, 750 degrees, okay, in 365 calendar days. So you're doing 3-4 degrees every day, 6 days a week. You know, how much time do you have to spend with those guys taking 8-10 hours to learn and discuss a catechism? Yeah.
And to his point, my own grandfather, when he came back from World War II, as many of them did, went through all 3 degrees in, I think, 7 weeks.
Yeah.
I can't imagine he got a whole lot from that.
Exactly. And my father was the same way. He joined in 1959. I joined in 77. And it was like, I asked these guys questions back in the day, and they didn't know anything. They had nothing to teach. Dwight Smith is a past Grand Master of Indiana who wrote a beautiful essay in the early 60s. Now think about it, early 60s. Freemasonry was at its zenith as far as size, number, and money. And he says, you know, we're in deep trouble because we've lost the essence of Freemasonry, that education, that power, and that teaching. And we will suffer for it. Now, I'm sure in 1962, they laughed at him like he was absolutely lunatic. He says, look how big all these Grand Lodges are. Ohio, I think, had right at 270,000 members at that time. We're down to about 75,000 now, okay? He's looking over the horizon and predicting doom and gloom. And they all think he's nuts. And then people like me and our brother Clevenger here looks at it and says, he's right. And it's beginning to soak in, which is why the Grand Lodge Education Committee went to the effort to put together that Master Craftsman program, okay? Because they're beginning to realize we need to do better. So when we formed Arts and Sciences Lodge, we spent a lot of time discussing what are we going to do, why are we going to do it, and how are we going to do it. And what I want to talk about now is how we educate new brothers at Arts and Sciences Lodge. a process that we use that has resulted in some amazing successes. And I can tell you about some other lodges that have embraced similar programs with similar outcomes, okay? We look at that. Our duty as a lodge, duty, not duties, plural, duty, our overall responsibility is to make Masons. That's what our charter tells us. We are to make Masons and take care of our widows, orphans, and brothers. That's what our charter says we're supposed to do, okay? All the charity and all that kind of stuff is great. It's a byproduct of making Masons because good Masons are good men and understand the value of charity. But we are not a charity. We are here to make Masons. That's why we meet in our meetings. And if we're not making a new Mason through our ritual or advancing a Mason through our ritual, we are here teaching ourselves because we are all Masons and we all need ongoing education. We can learn academics anyplace else. But the only place we can learn Freemasonry is right here in this room. So it's our duty as a lodge to make sure that that happens. That's why at Arts and Sciences, every meeting has an educational component, and it's usually a discussion of some interesting topic, okay? And we get down and dirty and real deep on some of these topics because that's how we learn. We had a discussion a while back on the 4 cardinal virtues. Why are they cardinal? Why are they virtues? What's the value of them? And how do they apply to our daily lives? That's what we do, and that's what lodges could do and should do in whatever way they want. So, education starts, Masonic education starts before they ever sign the first piece of paper for their petition. When a brother comes to you and says, I'm interested in being a Freemason, what should you do? I know what most people do. So here, what should you do?
Why?
Ask them why. Yeah.
Ask them why, yeah. And what would you hope to hear?
Better myself.
To better myself. Okay.
I know of men who are Masons, and I want to be like them.
That's a good one too, yep. Yeah, a comment over here I missed?
I think that I don't know is a more appropriate answer. They wouldn't know too much about it, I guess, unless they didn't know other Masons.
Okay. Well, I don't know is not a bad answer.
That was my answer. I
Yeah.
don't know. It seemed like a thing to do. And
Okay.
I knew a guy that spoke highly of it, but he didn't tell me too much about it.
There you go. Now you're heading off into, okay, so I've heard good things about it. I've read good things on the internet. Maybe I even read Chris Hodap's book or Brent Morris's book, you know. And I have a favorable, and I want to know more because the craft has dangled a promise, improvement, brotherhood, honesty, integrity, morality. That's what we promise. That's what we have to deliver. And what I'm going to talk about is how do we actually make that come true? Okay? Yeah.
What about those that say, my father wasn't, but for generations behind him they were, for 10 generations.
Okay. Okay, so then you follow up with a question, something like, okay, so your father made a choice. We can't understand why. Why are you choosing to look at it now? Okay? Then we get into questions. Well, what do you know about Freemasonry already? So we can correct any misconceptions. No, we don't slaughter goats. Sorry about that, you know, no human sacrifice. Okay. What would you like to know about Freemasonry? Okay. And this is a conversation. It's not a 2-minute conversation. It is a lengthy conversation to really figure out what are they looking for. Tell you a story, true story. This guy, I'm not going to get too much detail because you'll figure out who he is and he'll get me in trouble. I was at a deputy school when I became district deputy Grand Master, and a prominent Mason stood up and said, we need to make sure that, well, I'm going to tell you a story. He says, me and my guys from Widow Sons are out riding around one day. We pull into a tavern to have a couple beers. And we're standing at the bar, and this guy walks up and says, hey, you all Masons? And they go, yeah. He goes, well, I've always wanted to be a Mason. They said, great. And he pulled out a petition and handed it to him. He says, when the committee met with him, he says, what do you mean? You do more than just drink beer and ride around? Yeah, well, I don't want to do any of that other stuff. And he says, thank God we got investigating committees. Now, where was the real problem?
Well, they handed him a petition.
Yeah, what the hell you doing handing a petition to a guy you've known for 30 seconds in a bar? you know? Exactly. This guy had a really big heavy gold chain on his neck when he told that, and he didn't understand the importance of screening people before the committee, okay? So what we do at Arts and Sciences is this. If you say, I'm interested in being a Mason, we said, fine, come to dinner with us. Spend an hour eating with us, sitting at a table, talking with these guys. Tell us about yourself, your history, your background. What are you looking for? What's your goals in life? And more importantly, this is who we are as a lodge. This is what we look for. This is what we expect. We don't want to see you join, sign up, and disappear. We want you to come and invest an hour or two every week for the next year and a half in your training and education. We tell them that up front. We're going to meet with you for at least an hour every week for over a year as our way of training you. And if you're not willing to do that, we'll help you find a lodge that's more to your liking. Simple as that. We set the bar really high. We're selective because Freemasonry should be selective. Not everybody should be a Freemason, I'm sorry. Now, low numbers, that's a business problem, not a Masonic problem, okay? It makes it hard to keep the lights on. It makes it hard to pay the bills or the staff at the salary at the Grand Lodge. Gosh, I'm sorry about all that. You know, I've got a grand Masonic building in Springfield that's going to go on the auction block in 10 years. You've already lost a great building here in Columbus. I'm sad about all that. But those aren't Masonic problems. Those are business problems, organizational problems. Masonic problems are, how many people do we got in the room tonight? You know, when I was being a deputy and some lodge would say, you know, we're doing really good. And I says, really? Okay, how many guys did you raise in the past 2 years? And how many of them are in the room tonight? Ooh, yeah. Maybe you do have a Masonic problem, you know?
Hard questions.
Yeah, but important questions, okay? So, we start educating our guys before they ever sign a petition. They come to 3 dinners. 3 months of coming and talking to us. We make sure that if I talked to you last month, I'm going to sit at a different table. You get to talk to other guys. After the 3rd dinner, if you're still interested in coming around and we like what we see, then we'll talk about a petition. Now, by then, you've already had conversations with 8 or 10 of our members. Wow. That makes the investigation process pretty easy. Yeah, we all know this guy. We've been talking to him, you know? That kind of thing. But we educate him about who we are, what we expect, and what we are willing to offer. If you're willing to invest your time in us, we're going to invest in you. Okay? So, the guy decides he wants to go it. He turns in his petition. Okay? He's investigated. As soon as he clears the ballot box, we identify a master craftsman for him. Okay, our master craftsmen use the Grand Lodge Master Craftsman program, but we also use the Carl Claudy Introduction to Freemasonry for supplemental readings. If you notice in the Education Committee materials, there's a thing called Bulletin 11 that for a lot of years said you can't use anything in candidate education that's not approved by the Grand Lodge Education Committee. And so you ask the question, so what is approved? And there was a blank space. It's like, duh. So if I pull, if I pull a Mackey's off the shelf, am I breaking the code? Technically, yeah. Well, we fixed that in the Grand Lodge Ed Committee about 2009. Me and a couple guys got together. We came up with a list. We got it approved. So now there's actually stuff you can use to help teach candidates. Use them, you know? So that when someone says, wait a minute, there's this word in the obligation, hail. What's that word all about, you know? I'm going to back up, tell another story. I was at a table lodge in Dayton, and I talked about how shabby the training of new Masons has been for years. And this one past master got offended. And he said, he came up to me afterwards, he goes, I've been training candidates for 25 years, and they all know everything they need to know to be really proficient when they're done. I went, great. I says, so answer me this question. I says, in the inter-apprentice obligation is this word hail. What's that word mean, and why do you think it belongs in the obligation? And he looked at me with kind of a blank stare. I said, so you're telling me that a brand new entered apprentice who downloads the basic education course off the Grand Lodge website, goes to page 14 on the glossary, knows something you don't? He just turned around and walked away. You know? The hardest part about improving your education is getting the people who have never had the benefit of a thorough education to see the importance of it. I never had to do this. Why should I ask this next person to work extra hard? And the answer is because it's an investment in the future of your lodge. Okay? So we use the basic education course, we use Carl Claudia, we use every resource available. And that master craftsman meets with that guy before he's initiated, introduces himself, talks to him about what's going on, creates a schedule of when they're going to meet, what's convenient with time, schedule, place. So they have plenty of time and opportunity to talk. They're building a relationship. What a novel idea, to actually get to know the people you go to lodge with and understand their likes and their dislikes. And you become friends. Wow, this is neat, okay? So the night of his initiation then, he goes through his initiation ceremony. We've all been through it. It's pretty impressive. It's like drinking from a fire hose, and he hasn't remembered squat. Maybe 4 or 5 things stand out in his mind, but that's okay. Because the initiation ceremony is meant to be an emotional experience, not just a simple academic cerebral one. You know, if you wanted to just understand what happened, you just kind of read through it in plain English, or you watch a video and you're okay with that, yeah? But it's that emotional feeling that really matters. And that's why the ritual is so important to be done impressively. Not so you can get an award from the district that says you did it letter perfect, but because you can make an impression on that candidate. Wow, this hit me right here. You know, I can't remember much from my entered apprentice degree, not because it was 42 years ago, but because when I stood about this general area, this guy about that tall with wrinkles all over the place named Art Sheets gave me an apron, and he told me some really cool things. And the one that stood out the most to me was, no higher honor can ever be conferred upon you than this, which we now confer. Wow. That's why whenever I get introduced, I'm Brother Dan Hrinko. That's the highest honor. You know, all the other stuff that I've done doesn't matter. That's it. This is who I am. You know, my purple apron sits in an apron case. I'm done. Job's over. No big deal. Okay? It's an emotional experience. So you as officers, you as a lodge need to perfect your ritual so you can give these guys the best experience possible. That lecture is a great overview of all the wonderful things that are to come that come so fast. So what do you need to do? Well, you need to do what Dick Snow's been doing and what we do all the time. We start meeting with that guy once every week for at least an hour. And it starts with 25, 30 minutes of let's learn the first 3, 4 lines and that kind of stuff. Let's discuss what's in it. We also go through the entire entered apprentice degree line by line in the ritual. This is what happened. This is where you were. This is what they said. This is why it's important. We go through the entire entered apprentice lecture, line by line. This is what this means. This is how I see this. This is how this helps me. And this is where I get to talk about things like the ashlars, my favorite symbols. You know, we here learn about rough ashlars, a rough stone from the quarry, the perfect ashlars are perfect, ready for the builder's use. Yeah, that's great. But did you ever think about the fact that that is a beginning and an end point of our journey in life? And that between those two is a line that maps out our course. And that when we talk about vices, we're talking about those habits that distract us away from progressing on that path. And when we talk about superfluities, we're actually talking about those things we spend time on that are of no real value or benefit. You know, I'm proud to say I've never seen an entire episode of Survivor. Why? It's a superfluity in my mind, you know. Something I could do that would be a complete waste of my time when I've got other things to do to continue on my journey. Maybe you read another section in another book. You know, Andrew Hammer's a good writer. I don't like his attitude, but he's got some real good points, you know. And if you meet him in person, he's the same way. He's just abrasive as hell. But he's bright and knowledgeable and insightful, and he doesn't care about the impression he leaves, that's for sure. But he does write a powerful book. Great ideas. I wouldn't put him that way. I didn't. Okay? So that's what you do. You talk about the lecture. Now, what else do we do? Well, we've got 3, 4 entered apprentices going on at a time. So once a month, all the master craftsmen and all the apprentices get together with our junior warden for what we call a lodge of instruction for entered apprentices. So what they do then is they sit and talk amongst each other. We learn how to be active in a discussion. We learn how to ask questions. We learn how to share ideas and thoughts and observations. Because new guys have great questions that I haven't even thought of and force me to think. So when I'm teaching, I'm actually learning. No better way to learn something than to try to teach it and have that person ask questions and make you say, dang, I don't know, I'm going to have to figure this one out. And then get on the phone and call other people and figure out what's happening. Or go consult the folks who wrote this stuff 200 years ago. Read what they said, you know. These are the kinds of things that we do so that in 4 months of that weekly meeting and monthly meetings, you've actually had a chance to really know your catechism, if that's what you're doing, and understand and explain everything in it, okay? So you got 3 months of dinners, 4 months to 5 months as an entered apprentice. We're up to almost 8 months since this guy came to us and said, I'm interested in being a Mason, and he's not even a fellow craft yet. Wow. But we're meeting with him every week, talking about all this stuff in depth. And by using the Master Craftsman program, the Carl Claudy books, the supplemental readings, and those gatherings with other Master Craftsmen every month, you've got a pool of knowledgeable Masons who can teach what they know to help everybody get that thorough and intensive education going. Okay? So he finally gets to be proficient. Now I'm going to tell you one thing I do that first time I did it, it kind of scared people. Get to the end of the catechism, you know, there's that last question about where were you placed in the northeast corner, my feet forming a square, yada yada. That's the end of the exam, right? Not for me. I ask another question. Now, I don't do this as a surprise. I warn them about it so they have some time to think about it. And the question is simply this. What symbol, element, or aspect of this degree do you find most inspiring to you and why? Now, that's a cool question. First of all, you can't get it wrong because it's your own choice. No matter what you say, it's the right answer. But why do you think that question is so valuable? Ideas?
It gets them to think.
It gets them to think. It demonstrates to the lodge that this guy knows what's in the degree, has had the ability to evaluate everything he knows about the degree, to find something that's of value to him, and make use of it in his daily life. That's transformation. Okay? Cliff Nicole, many of you know him, past Master of Arts and Sciences. He's got a favorite phrase that I've embraced. For things to be of value, you have to know it, understand it, and apply it. So let's take that with Freemasonry. If you can read what's in the book and recite it, you know it. You don't have to understand it, but you can do that. That's what I had to do. If I understand it, that means I can talk about what it means and how it might be useful. But that's not transformative until I apply it to my daily life. So that question demonstrates to the lodge that this brother not only could do whatever it is I've asked him to do to demonstrate his proficiency, but to demonstrate that he knows it, understands it, and can apply it. That's transformation. So he then gets passed to the degree of fellowcraft. Same process. Takes about 3 months there. Weekly meetings with your master craftsman to go through the catechism and the ritual and the lecture and the related materials and the schools of instruction, lodges of instruction with the senior warden, with other fellow crafts and their master craftsmen. And then you get to where you're finally raised. And then you do the same thing again. Now we got the 60-day limit on the raising with the proficiency, so we focus heavy on the catechism to get that out of the way. But we still expect them to go through the degree, through the lecture, okay, through the supplemental reading materials, and meet with the lodges of instruction for the master, with the master for the Master Mason degree. You've just used up 14 to 15 months of that man's time, but what have you given him? Let's see, an hour and a half a week for roughly 48 weeks. Start doing some math. You got about 85 hours of face-to-face contact, individual time, talking about Freemasonry. You've got 9 meetings, 2 hours each, with other brothers in your degrees talking about that. That's another 18 hours. You're up to 100 hours of face-to-face discussion emphasizing what's Freemasonry teaching us. 100 hours of time. That's why it's hard to be a Master Craftsman at Arts and Sciences Lodge, because you have to invest a lot of time in these brothers. But they become engaged with the lodge. There's a strong relationship built. So how do I know this works? If you come to Arts and Sciences Lodge and say, how many guys raised in the past 2 years are in the room tonight? There's an 80% chance they're there. 80% after 2 years. Average in Ohio, 11%. Okay? Now, is this just a fluke that we stumbled on that works for us? No. Lexington Lodge number 1 in Lexington, Kentucky. A friend of mine named John Bezak, he just wrote a book called Island Freemasonry. It's a really good history of how Freemasonry came into Kentucky. And he pointed out one reason why Freemasonry has such a mediocre track record of education is because the men who came to set up the first lodges in Kentucky were from Virginia. They had been Masons for about 2 years. They brought everything they knew with them to set up lodges in Kentucky. Whoa, wait a minute. If you've only been a Mason for 2 years and you've not had much formal education, how much do you know that you can teach? And the answer is not much. And that was his point. Okay? So what he and the guys at Lexington Lodge number 1 did, they looked around the country and looked at what lodges were doing and found lodges that were growing and succeeding, including ours. They figured out, what are they doing that we're not? And the first thing they stumbled on was education. Now, Kentucky is a mouth-to-ear state. So rather than having one guy and one brother working mouth-to-ear whenever they have the opportunity, skipping a couple weeks, you know, and all that kind of haphazard stuff, they created a structured program. Every Monday, 2 hours every week, you will be at Lodge. And we will teach you the catechism, and we will give you reading materials, and we will discuss those reading materials. And you will do this for the next 9 months to get through all 3 degrees. Sound familiar?
Did it in Florida that way.
Okay.
Florida, it was Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, 2 hours a day.
Yep. So what did John Bezak notice? Well, he's a former chief of detectives. He does statistics. Before they instituted this program, their activity rate was around 12%. You raise a guy, 12% chance that he's active. After 5 years of this program, 75% are staying active. Well, wait a minute, that sounds kind of like what we've run into. When you invest in a thorough education program to where these brothers know what's in that ritual, understand it, and can apply it, then you've transformed them into Masons. And Masons understand the value of coming to Lodge because every Lodge meeting is a discussion, it's an exchange of ideas and observations, and it's ongoing personal growth. That's what that ongoing education is. And that's why we started out with 24 members. We made it up to 42. We've had some guys move out of the area. We're now at 37 in Arts and Sciences. What's our average attendance? 25. Whoa, 25 out of 37. I think we're doing something right. We have 300 apprentices right now, 2 fellow crafts, and 2 guys waiting to get their EA. Okay? That's what we've been able to do by making the education the center of everything we do. So what constitutes a thorough education? You can never have enough. There's always room for more. Personal time, personal contact, and in-depth study. So Master Craftsman training is an excellent way to start. I was on the Grand Lodge Ed Committee when we wrote that program, okay? So I know exactly what's in it. It's actually based upon a program we took from California. California's making new lodges, and what are they doing there? A guy named Jordan Yelnick is helping organize lodges, and the first thing he does is, let's get a thorough education program put in place. And those lodges are beginning to grow. Past Grand Master John Cooper in California is a big fan of this whole process. He's been pushing it as well, and he's written a couple positive reviews of my book. So, anyway, brothers, that's kind of where I brought you. This is what I wanted you to see. You want your lodge to improve and grow. First thing you do, hey, let's get our ritual going better. Okay, that's a good start. But back up a step. What are you really supposed to be doing in lodge? And that's making masons. And to make a mason, you have to have thorough education in and out of lodge. And by doing that and having meetings where you leave saying, damn, I'm glad I came. I can't wait to come back next week to see what we're going to learn next time. That is the core of what you need to do to what Dwight Smith called bringing Freemasonry back into Freemasonry. So thank you, brothers. I appreciate your time. Hope I didn't bore you to death, but the bottom line is this is important stuff. So, you have any questions, concerns, gripes?
I do.
Any lynch mobs?
I do. You skipped over it.
What?
Okay. So you talked about the word hail.
Yeah.
But I was anticipating you were going to ask some brothers in the room what it meant.
Well, does
anybody know?
Got one, two? What do you think?
It means to hide, to bury in the ground.
Brian?
Bring your attention. Okay, let's look at the same word used in a different way. Hail to the chief. We say that. There's a song called that when the president walks in.
That's spelled differently.
H-E-L-E.
But hail to the chief is H-A-I-L.
Okay.
So H-E-L-E is what I was talking about.
Okay. Any other ideas? You need to get a hold of Chad Simpson on this one. Hell, H-E-L-E, hail is a Germanic-rooted word, okay? Hail, H-A-I-L, is to honor, okay? A Germanic word, H-E-L-E, is also to honor, to respect, to revere. So if you say hail, conceal, and conceal, you're kind of being redundant. I honor and conceal. So it's being used in this sense as a Germanic term. And I believe that's the way it explains it in the basic education course in the glossary. Yes?
I thought hail was the origination of hale and hearty, meaning worthy.
Worthy could be an English version of this whole idea of honor, revere, the worthy person, you know,
Hale and hearty, you were a man of stature.
Yep. Honor, not conceal, see? So, if you're not sure that I'm right, or you're thinking you're right, then what you need to do is go look it up. Find out for yourself. And if you think I'm full of baloney, say so. Yeah.
As a first-generation American on my German side, hail actually means late.
Okay.
Did you say light?
Yes.
Okay. Is that a literal transmission from Old German, High German, or from the Common German?
Common German, and that's a literal translation.
Okay. Yep, more to investigate. Now, 5 minutes of shameless commerce.
And I'm Vanna White.
Mike, are you being a shill?
I am.
When we started Arts and Sciences Lodge, we had tons of haters who were looking for a reason to mess with us and make us fail because they thought we were going to steal all their candidates. Didn't happen. They felt that we were being arrogant. No, we're using the same ritual and everything you guys are. We're just doing it our way. Okay? And I don't know, whatever, they didn't like us. So we were very careful on every single thing we did to make sure we were in complete compliance with everything in the code. And I even had an argument with a couple deputies about stuff, and they says, you can't do this. I said, show me where it says I'm not allowed. Then we started getting lots of visitors. And they say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? How'd you come up with that idea and the whole bit? So through the encouragement or harassment from the brothers, I ended up putting together a manual as to how we did it and why we did it. And that eventually became this book called The Craft-Driven Lodge. And it's titled that for this main reason. As master of the lodge, it wasn't my lodge. It was the brothers' lodge. Okay? It was just my responsibility to take what they wanted in their Masonic experience, to organize it and implement it. In other words, I'm the CEO, they're the board of directors. They tell me what they want from their Masonic experiences, and it's my job to make it happen. They're also my workforce. Because if in the East I say, let's do this, and they don't want to do it, well, what happens? It doesn't get done. Okay? So as master of the lodge, you are the head servant. And it follows the principles of servant leadership. There's also a process in there outlined about how we go about making decisions. That's why it's called the craft-driven lodge. It's a lodge that's driven by the will of the craft. We decided what we wanted in a lodge. We put together the principles. I got chosen to be the first guy in the barrel to make it all happen, and that's been handed on, but it's still run that way. So every year at our annual meeting, we have a discussion. What do you want to see happen during the next year? We've been doing this, that really stinks, then stop doing it. Fine. Let's do something new. Fine. A lodge ought to evolve, be dynamic, be responsive to the needs of the members, yet true to the principles of Freemasonry. The craft drives the lodge. The officers just make it happen. Simply that. That's why everybody in our lodge wears a plain white apron. Even the officers. Plain white apron. Because we're all brothers, period. Nobody in our lodge, other than visitors, gets introduced with any of their titles. It doesn't matter. We're all brothers who meet on the level. Except the guy sitting in the East, because that goes with the job. He's worshipful brother. After that, he's brother. Simply that. Because that is the highest title. I don't have any books with me, but they're available through McCoy Publishers, who is my publisher. And
you have a website, the Craft Driven Lodge.
I have a website for the Craft Driven Lodge and a Facebook page. So I put the notice for this on the Facebook page as well.
And I'll tell you, brethren, he didn't come here to sell books. I've known him. I've known him a long time, and I appreciate you being here.
Yep. I've done the math.
Yeah.
I'm up to 20 cents an hour for every hour I spent writing that book from what I've gotten back from royalties.
I hear you. I hear you. But I just want to let you know we appreciate your words and being here and giving us things to think about as we go forward. We welcome you back anytime. Thanks again. Brethren, let's give him a hand.